New Orleans Saints star defensive end Cameron Jordan wants to be a New Orleans Saint for the entirety of his career. Why that's important and the impact it has beyond just Cam Jordan himself. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Tuesday episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget you can subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And I am your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, senior writer and reporter for Sports Illustrated Saints News Network. Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at another small school prospect that you should know that the New Orleans Saints even included in a social media tweet, which should tell you everything you need to know about how this team potentially views that player. We'll also take a look at why trading for a Los Angeles Chargers running back Austin Ekeler would actually be a bad move, in my opinion, for the New Orleans Saints. But first, as promised, we wanted to discuss Cam Jordan's recent comments on social media. Less doing the social media scouting, not really a part of my sort of brand and what it is that I do, but there is something intriguing, and there are a couple of ripple effects here that I think are very interesting. And Cam Jordan has been open and honest about this for quite a while, that he wants to be a New Orleans Saint for the entirety of his career. He wants to be with one team. He wants to be, the word that he likes to use is lifer, and a lot of people like to use the word lifer. So one of the things that he mentioned is that on Twitter here recently, that basically everybody knows how he feels about the black and gold, that he's Saints Nation forever. Playing career-wise, quote, I'm locked in until the Saints don't want me no more. And I'll add a little addendum to that. Well, till the Saints don't respect me the way I want to be respected. And that's something that he's kind of always said as well, that he's around for as long as as long as the Saints will have him, basically, and as long as the situation makes sense. He went on to mention, or I retire with the black and gold with a mutual understanding. I'd rather play many more years, just to adjust the language a little bit, many more years in the black and gold and rise out with a black and gold Super Bowl in one or two of the next few years. Let's go. So he's establishing what he's always established. He wants to be a New Orleans Saint for the rest of his career. He is currently on what is effectively a one-year deal. He's on the last year of his contract. Yes, it was restructured, but this is effectively the last year of his contract, so they will have to work on another contract if that is going to come to fruition. That also kind of signals about all the things that he's always spoken about as well, that he's locked in. He's ready to be a New Orleans Saint. He has no intent on going anywhere, and that he wants to win a couple of Super Bowls in his career. Remember, Cam Jordan didn't show up in New Orleans until 2011, 2 years, a full calendar year almost after or more than a full calendar year after the Saints had won their 2009-2010 season Super Bowl. And so for him, there's still a goal out there, right? He's not Drew Brees. He hasn't gotten to that point already, and he wants that, and he absolutely wants to do that here in the city of New Orleans. So there's a couple of different things here. I mentioned that getting that contract would have to happen before the opportunity for him to be able to finish his career in New Orleans comes to fruition. And let me be very clear. It absolutely should. Cam Jordan should get another contract after the season. Cam Jordan, or maybe even by the time that we get to the beginning of this season, perhaps he's locked down an extension. But either way, it should happen, and he should absolutely get the opportunity to finish his career wearing, number 94 in the black and gold, wearing a fleur-de-lis on his helmet. The reason why I say that is because he has been the most consistent piece for this team for 12 years. Simply put, right? Drew Brees left a couple of years ago. Therefore, over the course of the past couple of years, he hasn't been consistent. But you want to talk about, because he hasn't been there, he hasn't been a part of the team, but you want to talk about consistency since 2011, since 2012, this is a guy who, well, first of all, has played at least 16 games every single season of his career, has only missed 2 games. It took COVID and a fractured orbital bone or an orbital bone fracture to get him to miss those 2 games. And let me emphasize that even more. It took a worldwide pandemic to keep him out for his first ever career game due to injury or illness. And then it took an orbital bone fracture for him to miss a game in 2022. That's absolutely crazy. And let me tell you what, and I mean that crazy as in unprecedented, right? Like something you don't necessarily expect. And so the other piece of that too is that I can tell you that they had to fight to keep Cam Jordan off of the field for that game. He absolutely still wanted to play with the orbital bone fracture just a week later because he had played the majority of, if I recall correctly, I think it was the Steelers game that happened because we walked into the locker room and then he did his interview with sunglasses on and it was swollen and all this other stuff. And that was when I told the story actually after that game about how making accusations about players not wanting to get healthy, not wanting to play, not wanting to be on the field, getting hurt, pretending to be hurt, all these other things are absolute crap. Absolute crap. And Cam Jordan was part of the reason why I shared that story because I watched what he did. I watched him get gouged in the eye at the beginning of that game and then play 99% of that game with one eye. I watched and I knew that they had to fight to keep him off the field the next week. I'm pretty sure it was the Pittsburgh Steelers game where that happened. Here's the other thing, though. It's in his DNA. The other reason that he wants to be, I believe, a lifetime Saint or finish his career as a New Orleans Saint and play for only one team is because it's in his blood. His dad, Steve Jordan, tight end for the Minnesota Vikings, played 13 years, 1982 to 1994, with only the Minnesota Vikings. Cam Jordan, so far, 2021 through 2012, 12 years has played only for the New Orleans Saints. He's about to match his dad. He's about to match that 13 years once he plays in 2023. So it's in his blood. It's in his DNA. His dad did it. He wants to do it as well. I don't know how closely those two things are tied, but I bet it has an influence. The last thing that I'll mention too is the impact on other players. There was also a day not too long ago that he was on Twitter. Cam Jordan was on Twitter. It was after he was extended or after his contract was restructured. Barstool Nola tweeted out Cam Jordan's going to finish his career as a Saint, or Cam Jordan is a Saint for life, whatever it was. To which he responded, well, not for life on contract yet. Then he responded, we added an LOL in there. He said, I currently only got 1 year left and I want to play many more, but you know, black and gold is all I want to know. And then he did his levels gift. The reason why I point this out is because a quote tweet to that tweet was Alvin Kamara saying, same. Shrug emoji, shrug emoji, shrug emoji. It's already a rarity to see a player come out and say, I don't want to leave the team that I'm with. We see these sort of PR responses over and over again. Well, you know, it's a business. And we understand that the NFL is a business first. And sometimes, you know, we don't have control over things. So I'm just worried about what I can control. I'll let them and my agent worry about what they control, and then we'll see where things go from here. But if I get the opportunity to play here for the rest of my career, I'll be happy to do it. Like, I know the response. I know it. I've seen it so many damn times. And so when you look at a guy like Cam Jordan who comes out and who has said nothing consistently but the same thing, I want to be a Saint for life. That has an impact on the fan base, that has an impact on the team, that has an impact on his teammates, as I just referenced with Alvin Kamara. And of course, it means the world to him because it's in his DNA and it's what he's always wanted. So my message is that Cam Jordan deserves exactly what he's asking for, which is to finish his career as a New Orleans Saint. Hopefully that contract extension gets done either by the beginning of next season or by the end of next season, and that we don't have to wait very long to know for a fact that Cam Jordan will very likely finish his career in New Orleans. And I'll tell you what, he's not the only other person that said it. Tyrann Mathieu has also mentioned that he wouldn't mind finishing his career in New Orleans either. I believe he said it in his introductory press conference. So again, the ripple effect, the waves that a guy like Cam Jordan makes with his loyalty to the organization's loyalty to him has ripple effects. It has echoes all throughout the rest of the locker room. Coming up next, should the New Orleans Saints add Austin Ekeler, the Los Angeles Chargers running back, to their locker room? I'll tell you why I don't think they should rush into that idea. Got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's say you had the ability to control whether or not Cam Jordan finished his career as a New Orleans Saint. Would you be sure to let it happen or make sure that it happens? Well, you can do pretty much exactly that over at Ultimate Pro Football GM, the world's greatest mobile game. I'm not even kidding. This thing is awesome. I play it all the time. You don't need internet. It's entirely offline. It's entirely free to play, all of that. You become the general manager and manage your own football franchise. You can help create lifers. You can import rosters and teams. You can make sure Cam Jordan finishes his career as a New Orleans Saint. You can draft, you can build teams, you can upgrade facilities. So much stuff, so much control that you have over your football franchise with Ultimate Pro Football GM. And with the promo code Locked On in all caps, you're going to get a 100% free boost to your franchise as well. All you have to do is enter that promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store, and you can find the app at ultimate-gm.com or by searching your app store Pro Football GM, Ultimate Pro Football GM, get you all taken care of. So check it out today. Ultimate Pro Football GM, start your dynasty today. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Make sure you don't miss out in tomorrow's episode. It is midweek fundamentals as well as midweek mock drafts. So we're going through both of those. Midweek fundamentals, just making sure that we're teaching you specific principles. Right now, we're really focusing on kind of contracts, things like that. But now we're going to focus tomorrow on the difference between available cap space and effective cap space and talk about how much money the New Orleans Saints draft pool will cost them or is expected to cost them and why. So we'll break that down and we'll do our midweek mock draft with some trade ups this time because ain't no way the Saints are drafting 8 players. Just doesn't feel realistic. We appreciate you as always. Making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So as we jump into our next topic here, should the New Orleans Saints trade for Austin Ekeler? I want to kind of do both sides of this argument a bit of justice, but I'll tell you right now, just so that there's no transparency, so that there's nothing but transparency, I don't think that would be a good move by the New Orleans Saints. Let me tell you why first, and then I'll argue against myself to wrap things up, just to make sure that we're hearing both sides of this, because Bleacher Report did a good job kind of presenting both the pluses and minuses of the Saints pursuing this move. But the minuses for me far outweigh. And so here's the thing that I look at. Austin Ekeler finished up his 4-year, $24.5 million deal, or not finished up, but is about to finish up. He's got one more year left on that deal. So he's due just $6.25 million going into 2023. That alone isn't bad. Remember, the Saints have over $14 million left to spend, not including the little amount that it's going to cost for them to sign and hold on to their draft class, which we'll get a little bit more in depth with those figures. But the first thing that I look at here is money invested at running back. You already have Alvin Kamara. I know his contract's restructured, but he's going to go up to $18 million next year, go up to, $29 million in 2025. If you're bringing Austin Ekeler in, you have to commit to him. That's kind of the point of him wanting to be traded away, is that he wants a contract extension and he wants to go to a team that's going to pay him. The issue with that is that the Saints have that money invested. They have, not a ton, $4 million per year invested in Jamal Williams, but that is an escalating cap hit all throughout. And certainly all of these things can be restructured and mobilized and moved around so that you can fit the new running back under your salary cap, and then perhaps sign Austin Ekeler to a longer term deal so that if you have to move on from Alvin Kamara, although he would like to finish his career in New Orleans, if you have to make that decision when his salary cap goes up in 2024, 2025, then you can move ahead with a couple more years of Jamal Williams and Austin Ekeler. Not a bad situation to have in terms of the names, but what about availability? Austin Ekeler's missed a lot of time with injuries. At 5'10", what is he, just barely 200 pounds? He's not really the most durable running back that's out there. And so when you look at what he's done so far, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of explosiveness, all of those things that we know Austin Ekeler for. And hey, Austin Ekeler in New Orleans brings New Orleans one step closer to having a fan-controlled football league, which I would or fan-controlled football team, which I would absolutely love. But at the moment, Austin Ekeler just doesn't feel like the investment that the Saints should be making with A, salary cap money, and B, draft capital. Now, I've usually been a guy that will come out and say, F them picks, like trade the picks, especially day 3 selections, things like that. So I will say this. If the price is right, then the price is right? So if you're able to trade a day 3 selection, a round 5, one of those round 5 picks or something like that to get Austin Ekeler to New Orleans, then fantastic. But I don't think it's going to be that easy. It might be, but I don't think it's going to be that easy. But with running back markets kind of tanking right now and things like that, then maybe there's an opportunity there. But unless that's the case, then I don't see this being a good enough option when you go into this year's NFL draft with a fantastic group of running backs. just thinking about 5th round possible selections, there are enough prospects out there that you can expect to be on the board. That's potentially where Georgia's Kenny McIntosh ends up. UAB's Dwayne McBride could still be there. He would be an absolutely great addition for the New Orleans Saints. Sean Tucker from Syracuse, Chase Brown from Illinois. There's a lot of really, really good running backs in this year's class that could be found at the 5th round. But also, if you don't make a move for a running back, then the 3rd round, you've got guys like Tajay Spears. 2nd round, you've got guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, who I would absolutely love to see the New Orleans Saints draft. So you can find similar builds to Austin Ekeler, younger, healthier, much cheaper, and without having to surrender draft capital for that veteran and guarantee a veteran running back contract as opposed to a rookie scale deal. So that's my argument against it. I think that it's far more cost effective, far more economical, and far more efficient just in terms of the amount of years you're going to get out of the player at their peak if you go into the draft and use your draft capital to bring in a running back. Now, if you were to trade for Austin Ekeler, how could it work? Well, we kind of hit it a little bit. The idea being that if for whatever reason the Saints and Alvin Kamara are set to part ways in the next 2 or 3 years, having Austin Ekeler and Jamal Williams for the next 2 or 3 years helps you make that decision with a floor, knowing kind of how far you're going to fall down, things like that. You can go back into the draft, try to find somebody of Alvin Kamara's similar skill set to add to the trio, and then grow that running back in time for Austin Ekeler or Jamal Williams to move on to their next contract. So it does give you a little bit of a bridge should you have to make that decision. That's kind of it. I guess the only other thing is that if Alvin Kamara is going to miss time in 2023, then you have a guy like Austin Ekeler who doesn't force you to change the playbook. You could still do Alvin Kamara things with Austin Ekeler, and maybe that would be a better look for Austin Ekeler, him teaming up with former AFC West rival Austin Carr and being able to be the guy, being able to work with a quarterback that goes short, a lot more like Phillip Rivers than Justin Herbert, who can get the ball, 50, 60 yards downfield, and with the offense would like to get the ball 50, 60 yards downfield. So maybe the system fits him a little bit more. You maximize his skill set as a pass catcher out of the backfield a little bit more with a scheme that supports that. And then because of that, you don't feel the loss of Alvin Kamara as much as you would without him. But I dare say that without committing a multi-year veteran contract to a running back, in addition to draft capital, you could still find exactly that same type of wrinkle and player in this year's draft. If you want to find somebody that can catch the ball out of the backfield, I mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs, I mentioned Tajay Spears. Those are 2 of several examples out there. Chase Brown is an example of that. I broke down a bunch of running backs that kind of fit both molds, or either mold as a finesse, versatile back or a power back that doesn't necessarily give you the passing down availability. But there are several players that can give you that passing down, third down ability that you have in Alvin Kamara. So I don't think that the arguments in favor of trading for Austin Ekeler are stronger than the arguments opposed to trading for Austin Ekeler. I think the Saints would be in a better position using some of that draft stock one way or another. I realize I just did this entire topic with Ultimate GM promo code on the screen. My bad, y'all. But anyway, the arguments for weaker than the arguments against. I think that the Saints should avoid a trade for Austin Ekeler unless it's literally like a future day 3 selection or something like that. Opposite that, the Saints should just go into this year's NFL draft and invest at running back. That's what makes the most sense to me. Okay, coming up next, we're wrapping up the show with one more small school prospect you need to know about that the Saints themselves have even acknowledged. Cody Mauch, the offensive lineman from North Dakota State University. Could he be a surprise first-round pick or potentially just the right pick at 40? We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We've spoken about FanDuel's win totals for the New Orleans Saints. A nice 9.5 Vegas, FanDuel believing in Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to get in on that action. FanDuel.com/lockedon is the place for you. And if you're a first-time user, you're going to be able to get that no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets that comes back to your account if your first bet doesn't win. So maybe you're looking at getting in on the NBA playoffs, which are right around the corner. You can do that without any hesitation because of that no sweat first bet. If you're a brand new customer, all you need to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. That'll have you super safe, super secure, super easy to use, get you all taken care of there. You can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drain, and you can even package some of those all together for an even bigger potential payout with same game parlays, which are a ton of fun in the NBA. There's also the MLB, NHL, WNBA is right around the corner with the draft now in the rearview mirror. Whole bunch of stuff for you to get in on today over at FanDuel. And you want to do it by getting that no sweat first bet. So to do that, you're going to go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on so that you can get your no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrap it up today's episode of Locked On Saints with one more small school prospect that you need to know, and that is North Dakota State University offensive lineman Cody Mauch. Now, forever I called this guy Cody Mauch during the Senior Bowl. It is Cody Mauch. But the big thing that you're looking at here is the way that he could potentially fit. Now, the reason why I ended up wanting to come back and circle around this is because in yesterday's episode, the Monday episode for Mock Draft Monday, we focused on small school prospects at each draft position for the New Orleans Saints. And that brought us down the road of guys like Dayon Henley out of Washington State. Later on down the road, we got into some running backs. We got into guys like Adetomiwa Adebawore as well, and others. And so when we looked at all of that, one of the things that one of the guys that I kind of glanced over in the midst of that was Cody Mauch. And what brought me back to it is that the New Orleans Saints, this is a Twitter heavy episode, tweeted yesterday about who should be, it was their own Mock Draft Monday, who should be their first round selection. And they had a couple of different slides of potential players that were kind of quote unquote on the clock with the scenario they were presenting to fans. And there were some small school guys. There was Georgia Tech's Keon White, a defensive lineman who I think is a very good defensive lineman, but not one that I would invest in the first round. He is very shades of Marcus Davenport, underdeveloped small school guy. They also posted the Adetomiwa Adebawore. They also got in Jordan Addison. But one of the other players that they also included was Cody Mauch out of North Dakota State University, the offensive lineman. And that brought me back to the Senior Bowl, when this guy might have been the talk of the Senior Bowl. The offensive lines are absolutely dominant throughout the Senior Bowl. They were so much fun to watch. And there were a few of those defensive linemen that still impressed while they were there. But this was a Senior Bowl participant. This is a guy that has played left tackle 37 games of his career, right tackle 2 games of his career, but has inside-out versatility, very likely to be a tackle-to-guard transition player at the next level. That checks a box if you've been following the New Orleans Saints for a while. He ends up weighing in during the combine at 6'5", 302 pounds, added a 5.08 40-yard dash, which is great for that size, and then improved on a short shuttle and 3-cone when he retested those into his pro day. He also put up 29 bench reps as well. So you see upper body strength, you see versatility, athleticism, and you also see all of the other things that end up usually drawing the New Orleans Saints, it seems, to a prospect. Small school, versatility, high athletic scores, all of those things. I'm actually pulling up the RAS score at the moment, 9.33. So again, another box checked. So when you look at what Cody Mauch, or who Cody Mauch is in terms of an athletic prospect, you get it. You see where it all fits together. But what is he as a technical prospect? Well, according to our friends over at the Draft Network, easy movement and lateral agility, toughness and play temperament and balance are all of his reasons to buy in. So those are the things that you're looking at. So let's think about this. Easy movement skills, lateral agility. Okay, that was a big plus for Andrus Peat in terms of his ability to move. Cesar Ruiz's ability to move, Eric McCoy's ability to move, and then, of course, Ryan Ramchik's ability to move as well. Teron Armstead absolutely checked that box. Previous left tackle, now, of course, in Miami. Toughness and play temperament. Okay, well, that sounds a lot like Trevor Penning. That's somebody that Dennis Allen really, really loves. And one of the things that he loves about Trevor Penning is that play temperament. Just wants him to stay healthy. Good balance. I don't know, what does that make you think of? Alvin Kamara, probably. But honestly, balance is something that's important across the entire offensive line. Maybe the one player that has struggled with it the most on the Saints offensive line has been, I guess, the two, Andres Pete and Cesar Ruiz. So there's your guards, right? So when we look at Cody Mauch as somebody that's a potential tackle to guard transition at the next level, it's easy to see that he could potentially plug in as a guard for the New Orleans Saints. This is something that's not far outside of their wheelhouse at all, to draft a tackle, move them to guard, draft a center, move them to guard, whatever. That's Cesar Ruiz, the latter. Eric McCoy was somebody that was drafted as a right guard, moved to center, Eric McCoy was. And then, of course, Andres Pete was somebody drafted as a tackle and then moved to guard. So then you look at the reasons for concern, and this is one you're going to hear from a lot of folks: length, also lower half power, strength in the lower half of the body, and then hand placement and pass protection. The thing to know most about Cody Mauch is that he is an absolute mauler in the run game. He is nuts in the run game. And that was what NDSU did extremely well. They were a gap power scheme. They forced those players, or that scheme forced players to be very, very good pass blockers, because it's you versus the guy in front of you, and your job is to run through that guy and get to the next one. And that's what Cody Mauch does extremely well. He gets up to the second level. He demolishes players as he's on his way there. He gets a full head of steam, and you cannot stop him. He is one of those guys. But in terms of dropping back and resetting into a pass set, that's where the weakness of his game has been. Now, it's not weak to the point where you should be massively concerned about him, but it is something that he'll have to continue to develop at the next level. And at the NFL level, that's going to be a quick adjustment, while you're also potentially transitioning positions as well. So that's a little bit where I get my hesitation when it comes to him. But a lot of folks, including Dane Brugler over at The Athletic and many others, believe that he'll be able to transition into an NFL starter early on in his career. And if the Saints were to invest in him, where would they invest in him? Well, the shocker would be the first round, which seems to make sense for the Saints, right? They always, particularly when they draft towards the back end of the first round, they'll take the guy that they like, as opposed to taking the guy that maybe makes sense to all the experts and analysts and fans and everything. And Cody Mauch could be that guy, much like Osiris Torrance could be that guy coming over from Florida. And if he were to make it to 29 and the Saints were to draft him, that would make a ton of sense. If he's gone to a team up ahead of him, then maybe Cody Mauch is the route that they go, and then they look at addressing the interior defensive line at pick 40. Or you flip it, and then you address the interior defensive line at 29, depending upon who's on the board. Let's say Mozzie Smith out of Michigan. Let's say Kalijah Kancey if he inexplicably falls. Let's say Adetomiwa Adebawore if you end up wanting to look at somebody that can be on the edge for you as well. And then at pick 40, you can go with a guy like Cody Mauch, still get a running back in round 3, still get another tackle or defensive end or defensive tackle or tight end even in round 4, and then continue on your own way. Now, the Saints aren't going to draft like that. They're not going to draft by position, but that's just an example of where Cody Mauch could fit in. And I think at 40 would be an excellent selection. I think 29 would be a little bit of a reach for him, but if they're worried that he's not going to make it all the way to 40, you go and you get the guy that you like. You go and you get the guy that you love. So just make sure you know the name. Cody Mauch, North Dakota State University. Keep it in mind. And then we'll have another small school prospect for you on Thursday to make sure you have in mind as well. And I think after that, we may have covered the surprise picks that could happen for the Saints in round 1. But never say never when it comes to this team, because they will get the guys that they want. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, Mock Draft Monday with some trade ups, midweek fundamentals. How do you develop the NFL draft pool that ends up being credited against your team? We'll break that down as we continue on with another episode of Locked On Saints tomorrow. For my everydayers out there, appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out Locked On NFL Scouting. Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino, bringing you everything you need to know about what it takes to build a successful NFL franchise. Go and check them out today on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I appreciate you, as always, y'all, making me a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.